We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With AllTrails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with AllTrails.
Morning, Al. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you.
Morning, all. Welcome to Alan Hudson's American Venture or American Dream hoodie, because it was a dream, but like many things do turn into a nightmare. You've spent 3 seasons from 1979 to 1982, kind of ish, in the Great Northwest in Seattle. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you got there, but we're going to nail down Vladislav Bogicevic. Bit of a mouthful, and he was a bit of a handful as well, wasn't he, Hud?
Yeah, there's some players you come across and you wonder where they come from. He was one of them. He was, if you used to look at him, it's like the Lionel Messi's and the Maradonas, the Alan Balls are very small people. They walk in a room and you can't believe that they can be so dynamic on a football field. But this fella was quite the opposite. He was a huge fella. If he said he played football, then you expect him to be a centre half. But got on the field, and he was a magician. He was. I was fortunate enough to see him early in my career and play against him a few times, Paul. But a couple of times before I actually got to the States, so I knew a little about him. So it didn't surprise me when I did finally get to play against him over there.
When was your first challenge against Bogicevic? He was born on the 7th of November 1950 in Belgrade, so he's slightly older than you. But when was the first time you come up against him?
I think it was when I went on tour with Chelsea. I can't tell you exactly where we were, because there were so many tours in that part of the world, over that part of the world, and for some reason, it's unlike us players when we're away to watch another team play, and we actually was at this game and Red Star Belgrade played, and he was playing, and he was, he just caught my eye, and I never forgot him, and it stuck with me, and then all of a sudden that was it. Never dreaming that I'd ever come up against him. He was that outstanding.
And he was what, 6'1", 6'2", Al Bogicevic, would you say?
He was about 6'2".
Yeah.
He looked bigger though.
Yeah.
And he was, but he was very well built, very powerful. You couldn't knock him off the ball. But he played at the kind of pace where you wouldn't get too far near him. He was he was a little bit like the Gunter Netzer. That kind of game, Tony Curry, kind of, fantastic first touch, fantastic ability, just born with that incredible talent to play the game.
And balance as well, good on both feet, wasn't he, Bogie?
Well, I was writing the other day, we did something about Peter Osgood's. Would have been his 75th birthday the other day. We did something about Oz, and I said that you come across few players in your life, or what I did at every club I went to. You come across a player with this incredible self-belief, and Chippy Brady had it at Arsenal, and Peter Osgood had it at Chelsea. They just didn't believe they was ever going. And Alan Ball never. They left the dressing room knowing that they were going to be outstanding. And Bogie was like that. He just had this self-confidence about him. And I know because I bumped into him one night. Well, he approached us one night before the Soccer Bowl when Seattle played New York, and he was. He must have forgot there was a game the next day because he was a little bit worse for wear. And he kind of welcomed us to this hotel, the function, and as I say, we all looked at each other and thought, God, we were off the booze, and there he is, half cut. So that was the kind of confidence he had. Incredible player, mate, an incredible man.
And his dicky bow halfway around his neck as well, wasn't it? But
he was, and he was Yugoslav, wasn't he? He was.
yeah.
The first story I ever heard about him was quite funny, really. Someone told me that when he was at Red Star, the club had said, we have an offer for you, and they mentioned the figure of £100,000. His response was he was getting the £100,000, and he said, "Oh, thank you very much." He said, "That'd be nice." He said, for my services." And they said, "No, it's not for you." He said, "That's what we're selling you for." So, but I would imagine when he went to New York, you'd have read it was what they put today, an undisclosed fee. So I don't know his transfer value, but I do know that when you got to New York, there was him and probably Giorgio Shinaglia were the two top men there, and obviously they'd had Cruyff and Best and an array of so many world class players there, but he was number one on the list.
He was he played in Yugoslavia because it was communist Yugoslavia back in those days. He won 5 titles for Red Star Belgrade, and he earned the nickname Blecky. Now, I'm not very good at Yugoslavian, and I've tried to translate it, but I can't, so I don't know what Blecky means. I'm guessing it might be some word for genius in Yugoslavian.
Yeah.
But players couldn't move abroad in those days until the start of the calendar year in which the player turns 28. So in 1978, while still 27, he then moved to New York, and they christened him Bogey. He scored 2 goals for Yugoslavia before the wars and the countries got divided into many different countries now. But he played in the 9-0 demolition of Zaire in the 74 World Cup finals, and his other goal was a win against Norway in June 1975. So he liked playing football and scoring goals for his country in June. In Europe, he played 17 games in the European Cup, scoring once. 12 games he played in the UEFA Cup, scoring once. Didn't score in the Cup Winners' Cup. Obviously, that was the most difficult tournament to play in because Chelsea won it in 1971. So in total, he scored 2 goals in 34 outings in the European Cups for Red Star Belgrade. Youth is 65 to 68, and then he moved seniors to 68 to 78, 185 league games, 17 league goals. So he wasn't a prolific goal scorer, but he was prolific on the pitch, wasn't he, for assists? In fact, 147 assists during his time at New York Cosmos in only 203 games. Phenomenal.
Well, he must have had, if you see all this palaver about Lukaku the other day about he got 7 touches in a game.
Yeah.
With Bogey, I would imagine he had more touches than anybody, no matter how many goals he's got or how many assists he got. He was what I believe is the hub of any football team is your midfield, and the best midfield players, I always believe, win football matches. Yeah. But it's funny as you're talking there, and you're talking about what he'd done for this, that, and the other. And I often wondered about Bogey. Every time there was a World Cup come on after that, I wondered about, and you hear these pundits and commentators talking about this fella and that fella, world class and world class and world class, and nobody's really heard of this fella. And it was, a bit like George Best from Northern Ireland, gosh, Yugoslavia, and as you say, them countries all split up and whatever, they went here, there and everywhere. To think that the whole world never see his talent in a World Cup was just a total injustice. It was like the fight we have at the moment about with the FA and stuff like that, about not playing in World Cups because of biasness, because of racial and managers and all that. And here we have a fella you know, I get to New York and, you know, you think, oh, good Christ. Although I like playing against the best players, you know, he would have brought a new dynamic to the game back here if he played over here. And in fact, he was outstanding one night. I see him play at Stamford Bridge for the Cosmos, and he was colossal that night. You know, he was just incredible. Yeah, you know, it's you know, these people on television who talk about football, you know, they don't mention stuff like that. You know, these World Cups and all that, they reckon they find a star and all that, but the real stars don't really play.
Yeah.
You know, Bogey was just, you know, when you were playing against him, it was just, it was an event. You know, it was a bit scary, and it was one of those where, you know, you had to really concentrate and not take anything for granted. You know, you had to be at your very best when you played against him. Otherwise, he'd make you look stupid, you know.
And you could have made your England debut, because England played Yugoslavia, didn't they, in 1974, through memory. Your debut should have been against Northern Ireland in 1972, as Bobby had told you he was going to make your debut, and Alf changed his mind. But Reeve didn't pick you for that game against Yugoslavia. He was holding you back to play against the West Germans. So you could have played against Bogey at international level as well.
Well, I doubt if he played that night, did he?
I'm not 100% sure. I've not looked at it, but he was very much part of that Yugoslavian team, and he was very much part of it until 1978. I think really what happens from these communist countries, when you do go abroad, then they tend not to pick you, don't they? They only used to pick from behind that Iron Curtain.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I didn't see that match because I remember the night he picked the team, and I just walked out and made my way back to Stoke, I think. So I didn't watch the match. I have no intention of watching the match thereafter. But so I wouldn't have known if he'd have played. But if he had have played, there'd have been something on the television or the newspapers the next day, you know, because that would have been his stage, you know. As was Giant Stadium, you know, he played as if he owned the ground.
But as you've always said, the big players, the big stadiums, that's their stage, and that's where they come to life. He also come to life in Sydney, didn't he? Or Singapore, or he was certainly on that tour when you were away with Arsenal, because again, once more, you were in the company of Red Star Belgrade and Celtic as well, famously, on that tournament.
Strangely enough, Paul, I never spoke to Jock Stein about him. Because I had several conversations with Jock, and as I told you, I went to Sydney race with him. We spent a day out, and it never. I think I was so taken aback by being with the great Jock Stein that it's like being with Waddington. You know, there's so many things when he left that had I known, I would love to have spoken about. But I remember the match in Singapore. It was probably the best match I played for Arsenal, and lo and behold, there's not many Arsenal fans there, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a red hot night, and I think it kind of eased my injury. I had a bad stomach injury, and I think it was good for the injury, and it wasn't one of those nights where you'd run around. It was all about, you know, possession, and I played against him, and it was the best I played, and I was quite pleased about that. But I remember the following day we were sitting down by the pool and we were having a couple of drinks, and before we went on to Sydney, and that night we got in the lift to go upstairs, and me, Malcolm, and George Armstrong, we were confronted by this huge figure, you know, and he said he said in broken English or Yugoslav, he says, "I watched you down by the swimming pool." We went, "Oh yeah," you know. They didn't know who he was, and we said, "Well," and And he said, "Well, if you want a man's drink, come up to my room." So he was a partier. I would imagine he was a bit of a hellraiser. He was one of those that didn't really give a damn about the world around him. He just strolled around, and it was the same off the field as he was on it, as if he owned the place, And strangely enough, the last time I see him was at just before my accident in 1996 for the 98 World Cup, was it? In France.
France 98, yeah. That would have been after your accident, wasn't it?
Well, I see him just before my accident. We went for the World Cup draw in Paris, I went over to we was at the new stadium, Stade de Paris at that time. I think it was brand new, and they did the draw. Pele was there, and there was a few other faces. But Bogey came up to me, which was nice because he recognised me. I didn't really think he knew who I was. I was one of the, as Canton I would say, one of the hod carriers, And he come over, and he strangely enough, he said, "How are you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm good. How good to see you," and everything else. And he asked me to try and get my coaching job in England. Right. And I said, I think I'll give him my card, and he probably threw it away. I don't know, but I had no chance. I mean, I was after a job myself a few years before in the game, as you know. And so there's no chance no one was going to listen to me. But it just goes to show, if I'd have had a club, a big club in England, and I knew he was available, forget about the coaching and everything else. Just his experience, his knowledge of the game would have been, unbelievable. You just couldn't say no to the man. He was just. I'd sit down my players and I'd just show him tapes of him playing. Yeah. That would be enough.
Did he not challenge you to another drinking contest, Al, that night, or had he calmed down a little bit by then?
No, it was hectic that night. It was there was so many people there, and I wish he had off, because I'd love to have spent more time with him. Yeah. Because he seemed a great one of the nicest men, and even on the field, to the extent of it, although he had that incredible belief in himself, he didn't do it he wasn't arrogant at all. He just had so much belief in his own talent. It was just uncanny, really. And he's one of those players. I used to say, if I had a jigsaw puzzle to pick my best team and who I'd like to be in it and everything else, it would have been great to have a few years to play. I would love to have been in the dressing room with him just to study how he prepared for a game. I would imagine it was a little bit like George, that he'd come in 10 minutes before the game, strip off and just walk out there,
If you want years of better sleep, then you have to upgrade your bedding during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. Right now, you can get Boll & Branch's best-selling, naturally cooling sheets with their best offer of the season. Feel the difference night after night of light and breathable sheets made with the highest quality materials. Shop the Boll & Branch annual summer event now for 20% off site-wide. Plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
Or Stan Bolt, even. Stan was in a betting shop till 20-3 before he, I've heard stories about him. He even put his kit on and put on his overcoat and went down the betting shop to have one last bet before the game.
But again, it's players like that, those maverick players, those players that they're uncoachable. There's actually not much that a manager can say on the day of a game or at any time, really, of how that player should play his game, because that player will just get on the pitch and he'll do what he needs to do. It's not scripted. He just ad-libs his way and dictates the play of the game.
Well, in them over in the NASL, then in them days, there was a vast distance between managers. It's like us in Seattle. We had Alan Hinton. I first went with Jimmy Gabriel, obviously, was great, and Alan Hinton was great, and We were an English-based team in Seattle because there was a lot of Brits there. Playing against Los Angeles, you know, they had Reiners Michaels as manager who played it the Dutch way, and he was there. That's why he brought Cruyff in there. And in New York, they had a manager who was just a front man, really, because you wouldn't tell Giorgio Chinaglia or Bogey how to play. Giorgio Chinaglia was known as a godfather, so you know there was no telling him what part of the pitch to go play on, and he was leading goal scorer every year, and they kind of knew what they were doing. There weren't no ground rules for them. There was no plan of how to play the game with New York. They were just a load of individuals who would just on the night. Well, they would play like there wouldn't be none of this stuff that goes on in England today about, you know, I go to Lukaku again as a great example, you know, that he couldn't fit in because he can't adapt and all that. These were all good players, you know, and they could adapt. When you go to America, you got to adapt to everything, adapt to the way of life. You got to not forget that you got the AstroTurf as well. You know, the AstroTurf was a different AstroTurf to what we had in Seattle. So there was so many aspects of the game that you had to change. And unlike in England, you know, you could never make an excuse. You know, it was there's too many excuses over here. You know, as to and this thing about giving players time to settle in, I just don't understand that for 1 minute. You know, I believe that a good player can come in and play.
Absolutely. And in 1975, while you're in England playing for Stoke, you played on the baseball ground and made a couple of goals for Jimmy Greenough. You beat Derby. You went on to win the championship that year, 2-1. But in America, you actually literally did play on baseball grounds, didn't you? The pitches were just different. I mean, Pele, I remember Pele making his debut. They painted the pitch green. They weren't real football pitches that you played in, nor stadiums, was they, Al?
Well, the strange thing is, one of the funniest things, you know, they're very strange. I don't know what nationalities they were. Obviously, some Americans and whatever. But I walked into the Kingdome one day. We were playing this night, and they were working on they just played American football on the pitch, and they were all debating because all the lines were all over the pitch, and they were debating how they got the lines off.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand it. I stopped and I was just asking because I had to play on the thing after, and I wondered would it be slippery, would it be this, a bit late to paint the pitch kind of thing. So anyway, they were told white, yellow, red, this, all this kind of stuff, and scrubbing it. And I just said to one of them, wouldn't you be better off painting it green? And they didn't get it, you know. And I thought, well, it's just common sense, you know, just paint green, these lines that we didn't need, you know, because in our day, they used to have the 35-yard line, as you know, and the 35-yard line was the line that was new to me. I'd never seen it before. It was they had that instead of penalties, you know. It was they called it the shoot. That was a shootout. So we had that line going across, but there's all these other lines. I said to them, just paint it green. They looked at me as if I would just come off the building site, you know. But that's the way they were over there, you know. It was crazy, really. And one regret I did have was playing on. I think I told you that when one of my last games there, we lost the soccer ball, and Bogey played, of course. And I remember coming out before the game, and it was in San Diego, and they had the big diamond on about a quarter of the pitch, a third of the pitch, which was in the right bit, was in the right back position, kicking one way, the left wing position kicking the other, and I couldn't go on there. It was unbelievable, and it kind of threw me off my game, and it wasn't really. I remember Ray Evans being right back, and I said, Ray, I won't be coming short tonight, mate, not on this, you know, the red stuff. And you better get on with it on your own. And it kind of, I'd like to have played that game again on a real pitch, you know.
So what was your most difficult opponent? The players that you played against, Al, or the pitches?
Well, it's I could complain, but every individual's different.
Yeah.
There were so many types of pitches, especially AstroTurf. I remember going down to. I remember going down one day to QPR's pitch when they had AstroTurf and to see Tony Curry and for a training session. I think Venables was manager, and I walked on the pitch there, and it was just like walking on the M6. Tony went there because he wanted to come back to London and play.
Yeah.
I think it was the year they got to the FA Cup final, and I said, it's going to ruin you, mate. It's going to finish your knee. It was like playing on the motorway. And we had that in America. There was some pitches. Vancouver was one that and it wasn't just the underfoot. It was like the bounce of the ball and stuff like this, But I was quite fortunate at Seattle that they had a bit of a cushion on there, I suppose the American footballers would complain, if it was too hard, the surface. But the places like Boston where they didn't play where the American footballers played, they didn't matter about the underfoot,
Yeah, I remember Frank Worthington went, because Frank played out there, didn't he, for a number of teams, including Philadelphia Fury. And they asked him, what did he prefer, AstroTurf or grass? And Frank said, I don't know, I've never smoked AstroTurf. which is the right answer that you would expect from Frank. There were characters out there, is what I'm trying to say, Al, as well, weren't they? It was serious, but characters.
Yeah, well, that was the naivety of the American press, and they knew nothing about our game anyway, and it was new to them. But that's the kind of thing that Frank would say, and I know that George Best said it to somebody at the airport in Vancouver. It was like it was kind of, they asked him a couple of questions, and the other one was, he said, "What brought you to Canada?" And he said, "Well, I was at London Airport. I didn't have anything to do." He said, "I usually go to Spain." He said, it was close to England. He said, "But," he said, I thought I'd try something different." And he said, "I went to the Gents, and on the way back to the Gents, I see a big sign saying, 'Drink Canada Dry.'" So here I am. So, and they didn't even get that one. So that was the kind of. But strangely enough, I was thinking about the humour in the dressing rooms this week. It was incredible. You had to really be on your toes. So I think that was why the Fleet Street was so great at then times, because they knew they had to be on their toes, and you had to have a sense of humour,
They were sharp, though, in Fleet Street. Over the other side of the pond, they don't necessarily get our humour. The young Americans didn't get Harry's humour when Harry was out there, and they used to give him some tips for the GGs, didn't they? And they're still looking now, I think, for some of those tips.
Yeah, they're looking for a couple of horses. Yeah, they're looking. I think we went to our haunt was Longacres. That was a local track, and there was a couple of young Americans. They were great kids, and they were decent players. And Harry come in, and it was always jibing at Harry, always ribbing him. And he come in because he wasn't a manager. Harry was an assistant manager at that time. He took the reserves, and someone said to him, "How'd you go?" "Yes, Harry." He said, "Well," he said, we didn't win a lot of money. He said, "But we had a great day." He says, "But what you boys must do," he said, "especially you American boys," he said, "if your wages are a bit low, look out for these two horses." He said, "Get the Seattle Times every day." He said, "Just watch out." He said, "They both will win." He said, "One's called Loose Button. It's got to come off. And the other one's Dusty Carpet." He said, "It's never been beat." So, oh my God, so every other day they were saying, "Harry, we're looking out for these horses. It don't look like they're running, mate." And Harry just looked round the room, and we'd all like have a little laugh at their expense. But that was the way it was that was the way it was, and that was as a going back, that was the dressing room kind of humour, the difference between us and them. But they were. I've got to say they were great, but the young Americans were a great part of the dressing room. You know, they wanted to learn, and they wanted to know that. You know, I used to take, when I was captain there, I used to always invite them out with us. You know, because they were such a vital part of our team. You know, you had to. One thing we should have done in this country is exactly what the Americans did. You had to have four Americans on the field, North Americans at all time. And we had that and so they were vital part of our team. You know, you only had to have a one or two dodgy Americans and you had no chance.
And in England, we kind of did have something like that, but the other way, when the foreigners first came over here, as you was going over to America after the 78 World Cup finals, we had an influx of them. I think they were restricted to probably 2, 3 or 4 maximum that could play in England. I mean, of course, now times change, and you're talking about George Best going into the toilet and drink Canada Dry. That was similar to how you got over to America in the first place when you met Bobby at Stamford Bridge, and again, an if only moment, wasn't it, Al?
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, it was. You couldn't really write the script. It seemed as all mapped out. And when you think how many people, I was just. I was on the run from Arsenal. I was AWOL, and I had no intent of going back there. So I was still contracted to them, and. Christine Matthews said to me one day, "We got an empty box if you want it on match staging and have it." And so I would invite.
To listen to the rest of this podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/SRBmedia or just follow the links in the description. Thank you.